You've probably seen the explosive headline. Former President Donald Trump is seriously considering pulling the United States out of NATO. It's a move that could completely reshape global security. So today, we're going to break down what is really truly at stake. Okay, let's just dive right in. These are Trump's own words, right? A direct shot at an alliance that's been the bedrock of American foreign policy for 75 years. Calling NATO a paper tiger? Well, that's not just some throwaway line. It sets the stage for this entire conversation. And that quote, it really leads us to the big question we're tackling today. What on earth could actually push NATO, the world's most powerful military alliance, to the breaking point? Is this all just talk, or is there a real and present danger to its future? To get to the bottom of it, here's how we're going to break it all down. We're going to start with the immediate spark for this threat, a hypothetical war with Iran. Then, we'll unpack an old complaint that's been simmering for years. We'll get back to basics on what NATO's purpose actually is. And finally, we'll tackle the million-dollar question. Could a U.S. president really do this? All right, first up, the Iran war catalyst. Why is all this blowing up right now? Well, the answer seems to lie in a very specific and very high-stakes scenario. So let's paint the picture our source material lays out. Imagine the U.S. is at war with Iran. Trump is getting more and more frustrated because, as you can see here, his NATO allies are dragging their feet. They don't want to get involved. Some are even denying the U.S. permission to use their bases or fly over their territory for offensive strikes. And then you get this really blunt statement from the British Prime Minister, this is not our war. And that is the flashpoint. And wow, this slide really puts into perspective how much things have changed. Just think back 25 years ago, after 9/11. NATO invoked its Collective Defense Clause, Article 5, for the only time in its history. Allies stood shoulder to shoulder with the U.S. in Afghanistan. It was this incredible moment of unity. But fast forward to today's scenario with Iran, it's a completely different story. That solidarity, it's just gone. But here's the thing. This current frustration over Iran, it's really just the tip of the iceberg. It's built on a much older grievance that has basically put the entire alliance on trial. Yeah, the conflict with Iran might be the catalyst, but Trump's beef with NATO is nothing new. For years, he has argued that many of these member nations are, in his view, exploiting American goodwill, that they're relying on the U.S. military to protect them without paying their fair share. And this number, this is what fuels his entire argument. 23 out of 28 members are still not meeting their own defense spending goals. So from Trump's perspective, this is just fundamentally unfair to the American taxpayer. The key takeaway here is that this argument about who pays for what has been simmering long before any potential conflict with Iran ever came up. Okay, so that's his argument. But is his expectation of what allies should be doing? Is that even what NATO is for? This brings us to a really fundamental question. What is NATO anyway? And at its core, it's a defensive pact. I mean, if you look at the treaty itself, it's incredibly clear. NATO was created for the collective defense of its members against an armed attack. The key words there are defensive and attack. It's all about having each other's backs if one of you gets attacked, not about automatically joining every offensive war. And this slide just lays out the fundamental disagreement perfectly. On the left, you've got what Trump expects, allies jumping in to help with offensive operations and wars of choice. But on the right, you have what the treaty actually says. Collective defense kicks in only when a member nation is attacked. As one expert put it, NATO is not about following the U.S. into whatever war it chooses to undertake. That's a huge difference. All right, so with this massive disagreement as the backdrop, let's get to the bottom line. Could it actually happen? Can a U.S. president just wake up one day and unilaterally pull the country out of this 75-year-old treaty? You know, for the longest time, this was a giant constitutional gray area. The Constitution is very clear that a president needs the Senate's approval to make treaties, but it's completely silent on whether a president can just pull out of them all by themselves. But, and this is a huge but, that ambiguity is now gone. A law passed just in 2023, sponsored by Marco Rubio, tackles this exact question head-on for the very first time. And this new law makes the process pretty darn clear. The path to withdrawal is now officially defined, and you can see right here just how steep that path is. A president absolutely cannot act alone. They would either need an entirely new law passed by both houses of Congress or get a 2/3 supermajority vote in the Senate. Those are incredibly high hurdles to clear in today's political climate. And it doesn't even stop there. There are two more major roadblocks. First, any attempt to get around Congress would almost certainly be challenged in court. kicking off a long, messy legal battle. And second, NATO's own rules require any country that wants to leave to give a full year's notice. So the idea of a quick, sudden exit, it's pretty much off the table. Which really brings us full circle. Given all these major legal and procedural roadblocks, where does that leave us? Is this threat to leave NATO just a really high-stakes negotiation tactic, a way to force allies to spend more and get in line? Or does it represent a real, fundamental danger to the future of the alliance? That remains the crucial question.